Welcome back to Pattern Poole TV. If you're new here, I'm Monica, and my daughter and I, we make videos to share with you all how we make our Quilt-as-you-go quilts. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make these 3 easy patchwork blocks, and we're going to join them together with the cover strip on the back, so we have a no sashing look on the front. Personally, this is my favourite way to make quilts. You can have the cover strips on the front so they look like a sashing, or you can put the cover strips on the back, like I've done with this quilt, to have a no sashing effect on the front of the quilt. I came up with the idea years ago. So in 2005 I published my first pattern using this particular technique. So I have lots of patterns on my website that are now instant PDF downloads. So if you are as excited about this method as I am, you'll be able to download a pattern instantly and get started with making your own Quilt-as-you-go quilts with the easy cover strip method today. So let's get started. First of all, set up your machine to piece the blocks with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is what you'll need to make one block. The cutting instructions are in the course notes. Stack the 2 larger squares on top of each other and cut from corner to corner to make 4 triangles. Sew the blocks together like this with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure that you press all of the seams towards the darkest fabric. Now to set the block on point by sewing on the corner triangles. Starting with one triangle, fold it in half and mark the center with the pin. Fold the square in half and mark the center with a pin also. Place the triangle right sides together with the square aligning the pins. As this edge of the triangle is on the bias grain, I like to sew with the square on top to stabilize the stretchy edge of the triangle. Now sew a triangle to the opposite edge in the same way. This time at the center of the square is the seam. Just like that. Make sure that you press the seams towards the darkest fabric. Now trim away the excess of the triangles, making them level with the side edges of the square. Now sew the remaining triangle on in the same way. Here's our finished block. To make things easy, I designed the block to be a little bit bigger than what's required. So now trim it back to a 9-inch square by placing the number 1 of the ruler in the top right hand corner. Of course, reverse this if you are left-handed. Now align the 4.5-inch vertical line of the ruler with the top and bottom corners of the square on point. And now align the 4.5-inch horizontal line with the side corners. Trim up the side and across the top. Rotate the block so that the straight edges are on the top and on the side. Align the straight edges with the 9-inch lines and once again trim up the side and across the top. Make another 2 blocks in the same way. Now cut out the batting and the backing fabric. Position the 3 backing fabric squares on your work surface with the wrong side facing up. Position them all with a solid straight grain going down. With this method, any edge that's going to join onto another edge has a 1/2-inch gap of batting. So we are going to join these blocks together in a row. So these edges here will have the gap of batting. Try to be as accurate as possible, and if you feel that it's necessary, mark 1/2-inch lines on the backing fabric squares. Now position the patchwork blocks on top and hold the layers together with safety pins or basting spray, keeping the fabric edges as level as possible. Now to quilt the blocks. Start by stitching in the ditch of all the seams except for where they extend past the on-point square. Now sew 4 rows of quilting here that are spaced a 1/4 inch apart. You can use your 1/4 inch foot as a guide or mark the lines first. Quilt the other 2 blocks in the same way. With this method, you can quilt all the way from edge to edge on each of the blocks, but one of the issues is making sure that those quilting lines line up from block to block. Sometimes I'll alternate between lines going down and lines going across, but with these blocks I won't add any more quilting at this stage. Every time you quilt something, you can always expect it to shrink in slightly, so now we're going to trim the blocks back to 8 3/4 inches square. Trim the blocks in the same way as shown before, but this time the central lines will be 4 3/8 of an inch, because that's half of 8 3/4. You'll basically be trimming about 1/8 of an inch away from each edge. Now that we have trimmed, that gap of batting will now be 3/8 of an inch, and if it's not exact, that's totally fine. Now join the blocks right sides together with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and for those that use the metric system, that's 1 centimetre. Most times the 3/8 of an inch line is the first line that's outside the edge of the foot on the metal plate. It may be marked with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre. I have measured 3/8 of an inch from my needle and have marked my seam guide with tape. Make sure that the edges that you join have the gap of batting. Start and finish the seams with a reverse stitch to secure. Press the seams open. You will see that they are sitting nice and flat because of the wider than normal seam allowance and the fact that the batting doesn't go all the way through the seam allowance. Now it's time to make up the cover strip. The cover strip is a 2-inch strip of fabric that is made up with a 1-inch bias tape maker, and although we're using a bias maker, the strips don't have to be cut on the bias. They are best just cut across the grain from selvage to selvage. Now I've shown this in lots of my videos before, and in this video, because I'm just using a short strip, I'm just going to press the edges over with an iron. This is a 2-inch by 18-inch strip. I'm using a friction pen to mark a line in the center on the wrong side of the strip, and then pressing the edge over to meet the marked line. As it's a friction pen, the line disappears with the heat. I now have a nice, neat 1-inch wide strip. To ensure that the cover strip is straight and centered, mark a line that is 1/2 inch away from the center of the seam. This can be done on just one side or on both sides. Once again, I'm using a friction pen. Whatever fabric marker that you use, make sure that you test it first to ensure that it can be easily removed from the fabric. Some people like these pens and some people don't. It's a personal choice. Cut the cover strip in half and pin a strip over each raw seam, positioning it between the marked lines. In other videos, I've shown ironing the strip in place with fusible web or holding it in place with washable fabric glue. But in this video, I'm just going to pin them first and then just hold them in place and sew. Now to stitch down the cover strip, sewing nice and close to the edge. To make this step easy, you can use an edge stitching foot or a stitch in the ditch foot. Position the guide of the foot on the edge of the cover strip and move the needle position so that you have a distance of slightly less than 1/8 of an inch or 2 millimeters from the guide to the needle. Now stitch down both sides of the cover strip, reversing at the very top and bottom of each row of stitching to keep it nice and secure. The stitching lines that attach the cover strips just look like quilting lines that are sewn 1/2 inch either side of the seam. This is what it looks like from the front. And this is what it looks like from the back. I then decided to go back and add 2 more evenly spaced rows of quilting between the cover strips. And that's our little cover strip section for the Island Home Quilt. So this method is perfect for crazy patchwork quilts like this. It's also perfect for stitch and flip blocks. We have a whole playlist showing how to make this quilt here. It's great for applique blocks, and it's really good for any block basically that doesn't have points that finish a 1/4 inch away from the edge, like most patchwork star blocks. But if you did want to make a quilt that had a star block, something like this one here, all you have to do is just stitch a border around the edge of the patchwork star block, just so that when you sew on the cover strips, you won't lose the points in the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm just going to finish off now showing some of the quilts from my ebook, which is called A Quilt As You Go, The Moonshine Way. There's 5 different quilt patterns in this book, and each of the quilt patterns have got the option of making a lap, single, or a queen size quilt. Thanks for watching. Bye!